What would happen if the owner himself had to go undercover as an employee to uncover the dark truth inside the very restaurant he founded? Early in the morning, a heavy silence hung over the street that once bustled with long lines of customers waiting outside Caldwell's Grill, a restaurant chain once praised as a symbol of hospitality. Today, there were only a few old cars scattered across the parking lot, and a thin layer of dust coated the glass windows, as if marking the end of its golden days. Liam Cross, the founder of this empire, stood quietly outside, his hands tucked into the pockets of a worn jacket, his eyes scanning every detail as if trying to etch into memory the place that had once been the greatest pride of his life. Gone was the image of a successful businessman in a finely tailored suit and polished leather shoes. Instead, Liam wore a faded polo shirt with frayed shoulders, worn-out jeans and sneakers peeling at the heels. Pinned to his chest was a simple plastic name tag that read, "Noah Gray Trainee," a false identity convincing enough to fool even longtime employees. It wasn't just a disguise, it was his only ticket to truly step into the world of those who used to call him boss. Liam was not a man who acted on impulse. Every decision in his 20-year career had been calculated carefully, based on numbers, reports, and detailed plans. But the figures he had been reviewing recently gave him no peace of mind. Revenue at this branch looked stable on paper, but staff turnover had skyrocketed. Customer complaints were more frequent than anywhere else, and one phrase kept appearing repeatedly in reviews: stifling atmosphere, fearful employees, indifferent service. Several senior managers had reassured him, calling it a temporary staff transition or minor training issues, but Liam was too experienced to be fooled. When frontline employees began working in fear, it wasn't a simple operational problem. It was a sign of rot spreading from the core. He took a deep breath and walked toward the employee entrance, a door he had never stepped through before. The heavy metal door creaked open, revealing a space that felt like a cold storage room. Not because of the temperature, but because of the tension that filled the air. Employees glanced at him briefly, then quickly looked away, pretending to stay busy. No smiles, no greetings, only guarded, wary eyes. Liam caught a hurried whisper from a young worker in the corner, his voice shaky with anxiety. "Just survive this week." Those words pierced Liam like a blade of ice. He had built Caldwell's Grill on the philosophy, a workplace should be where people feel valued, yet now his own staff were just trying to survive. The sound of approaching footsteps pulled him from his thoughts. A man strode in with an overconfident swagger, clipboard in hand, his sharp eyes sweeping across the room. Marcus Hale, the branch manager, didn't bother hiding his annoyance at seeing a new face standing awkwardly in the middle of the floor. He stopped in front of Liam, his deep voice loud enough for everyone to hear. "You're the new guy, huh?" Liam nodded, playing the part of a nervous rookie perfectly. "Yes, I'm Noah." Marcus sneered, his eyes filled with disdain. "Great. Another one for me to teach how not to screw things up. Don't expect anyone to hold your hand. Go wash dishes, do it right, and disappear if you can't handle it. We don't have time for useless people." A few employees nearby let out forced, awkward laughs. It wasn't real amusement, it was the kind of laugh used to mask fear. Liam's eyes briefly met those of a young woman, her gaze tense and hesitant, as if she wanted to say something, but she quickly looked away when Marcus glanced in her direction. Liam nodded slightly, keeping his head down as he headed toward the dishwashing area, gripping a cleaning cloth so tightly his knuckles turned white. His heart pounded not out of dread for menial labor, but because of the anger building inside him. In just the first few minutes, he had already seen the disease eating away at this place: fear, contempt, and indifference. And Liam knew that what he was about to uncover behind that pile of dirty dishes might be far worse. The clattering sound of stainless steel trays crashing against each other echoed repeatedly, bouncing off the narrow space behind the kitchen counter. Liam stood silently in front of a sink, overflowing with dishes stacked high like a mountain, his hands moving quickly, careful not to draw attention. He wasn't there to learn how to wash dishes. but to observe every smallest detail, the glances, the gestures, the words, things no dry report could ever reveal. And after less than an hour, Liam already understood why this place was spiraling into crisis. Marcus Hale stormed in like a raging storm, his steps firm, his voice cutting through the air, instantly plunging the kitchen into a heavy silence. He still held a checklist in his hand, but the way he gripped it made it look more like a weapon than a management tool. His cold eyes swept over every employee, lingering just long enough to make them stiffen, like a predator scanning for the weakest prey. He cleared his throat, then suddenly barked at a young worker standing near the oven. "Jacob, what the hell is this, burnt bread? You think this is some charity kitchen?" Jacob lowered his head, his hands trembling as he placed the tray back, but Marcus didn't stop. He stepped closer, his sharp voice slicing through the air like a blade. "If you can't handle something this simple, you'd better get a job at a fast food joint. We don't feed useless people here." Jacob opened his mouth as if to explain, but Marcus cut him off immediately. "Don't speak. Just work, or quit. I don't care." The young man stayed silent, his eyes glistening, fighting back the lump in his throat. A young woman barely in her 20s stood nearby, placing a hesitant hand on Jacob's arm as if to comfort him, but quickly pulled away when Marcus shot her a glance. That look carried no words, but it was enough to make everyone understand that a single wrong move could cost them their job. Marcus continued moving around the kitchen, his harsh criticism raining down on anyone in his path. An older chef was scolded for being too slow, and a server was berated for forgetting to greet a customer properly. What angered Liam wasn't just Marcus's sharp tone, but the humiliation the public shaming used as a management method, relying on fear instead of guidance or encouragement. Marcus seemed determined to turn people into emotionless machines, too afraid to think or speak up. As Liam scrubbed the sink, he overheard hushed whispers behind him. "Just hold on. Don't say anything. Last week someone talked back, and they were fired that same day." Another voice answered, trembling, "I know, but putting up with this feels worse." Those words were a raw, painful confession. Liam turned his head slightly, catching glimpses of exhausted, defeated faces. These weren't lazy or incompetent workers, they were simply being suffocated by the constant fear of losing their jobs. Marcus's eyes landed on Liam, scanning him as if searching for a mistake to pounce on. He stepped closer, pointing at the stack of trays still waiting to be washed. "Move faster. Don't just stand there. I'm not paying you to be slow." Liam nodded, keeping the submissive look of a new hire, but inside, anger burned hot. He had always taught his managers that respecting employees means respecting customers, but here Marcus had trampled that principle without hesitation. As Marcus walked away, Liam looked around the kitchen, seeing every bowed head, every hunched shoulder, as if even a single word could bring trouble. In that moment, Liam understood more clearly than ever if this wasn't stopped, these very people would leave Caldwell's Grill, and everything he had built would crumble from within. The steady hum of the exhaust fan filled the kitchen like a heavy breath. Steam rose from a large pot of soup, making the air thick and stifling, the smell of burnt oil and spices mixing into something that only added to the exhaustion. Liam kept his head down, continuing the role of a trainee, his hands moving quickly as he washed the towering pile of dirty trays. But his eyes, watching from the corner, searched for something more, any sign of kindness, the very soul he once believed Caldwell's Grill was built on. And then he saw it, fragile and small, but enough to make his heart ache. Sophie Lane, a young woman with her hair tied neatly back and a face that still carried a hint of youthful innocence, crouched quietly in the far corner of the kitchen, away from Marcus's line of sight. A young boy, clearly new, had accidentally spilled a tray of sauce, the thick red liquid spreading across the floor. The boy froze, pale and panicked, as if he had committed a crime. Sophie said nothing, simply stepped over quickly, helping him wipe the mess clean, her voice soft and calming. "It's okay. Just be quick before anyone sees." The boy nodded, his eyes filled with gratitude, but his hands still trembled. The moment might have passed unnoticed if not for the sound of Marcus's shoes striking the hallway floor. Sophie's hands faltered, her cloth slipping, nearly knocking over a nearby tray. In an instant, Liam stepped forward, pretending to tidy the sink, his hand darting out just in time to steady the tray before it hit the ground. He caught Sophie's eyes for a brief moment, eyes full of worry and gratitude, but she quickly looked away, crouching again as if nothing had happened. Marcus walked by, his suspicious gaze sweeping the area, but when he saw everything in order, he gave a satisfied nod and moved on, leaving behind a room that felt like it had just been released from a chokehold. Liam returned to his work, but his eyes stayed on Sophie. He noticed everything: the way she quietly helped others without seeking recognition, the way she hid a reassuring smile behind her mask of tension. Small acts like hers, in a place like this, were like a faint flame in the darkness. He also noticed Mr. Donnelly, the older chef who had been with Caldwell's Grill for over a decade. Though his back was slightly bent and gray hair peppered his head, he still carefully wiped down surfaces no one had asked him to, muttering under his breath, "So the next shift won't have it so hard." A younger staff member passing by whispered, "Mr. Donnelly, you don't have to do that, your shift's over." The older man smiled kindly, his rough voice warm. "We work here, we should keep this place respectable." Liam tilted his head slightly, feeling something familiar stir inside him. This was the spirit he had built the restaurant on, the spirit of people who worked not just for a paycheck, but out of pride in every dish they served. But now that spirit was being buried under fear and oppression. He looked at Sophie, looked at Donnelly, and knew that if Marcus's reign continued, they too would eventually leave, taking with them the true soul of Caldwell's Grill. In that moment, Liam realized something important: there was still hope. People like Sophie and Donnelly were the reason he was here, the reason he endured this disguise and forced himself to watch everything with his own eyes. Because if he couldn't protect them, he wouldn't just lose a branch, he would lose the very thing that had built his name. Liam bent his head again, scrubbing trays like before, but this time his eyes burned brighter than ever. These faint sparks in the darkness would be what he would protect, no matter the cost. The sun was high, casting pale golden light through the small window, cutting across the cramped kitchen. The rhythmic hum of the exhaust fan mixed with the sharp clatter of knives on cutting boards and the metallic clang of pots and pans, creating a chaotic symphony. Liam stayed in character, crouched over the sink, scrubbing trays with quick, deliberate movements, his eyes scanning everything. He had been waiting for this moment, the moment that would show Marcus Hale's behavior was not just harsh words or insults, but something far worse: moral corruption. And that moment arrived faster than he expected. A customer had just left, leaving a folded bill on the table, double the usual tip along with a compliment for the server. Sophie Lane, her face glistening slightly with sweat, but her eyes filled with quiet gratitude, walked quickly toward the counter to place the money into the shared tip jar. It was a natural action, the rule Liam himself had put in place years ago. Tips were to be shared equally among all staff. But before Sophie could drop the bill into the jar, a rough hand snatched it away. Marcus appeared as if from nowhere. He pulled the bill sharply from Sophie's hand, his cold eyes locking onto hers, his voice low but loud enough for everyone nearby to hear. "I'll record this in the tip log. Just focus on your work and don't meddle in things that aren't your business." Sophie nodded instinctively, her hands tightening around her apron until her knuckles turned white. But Liam, watching from only a few feet away, saw Marcus slide the bill into his pocket without making any record of it. A young staff member glanced quickly at Marcus, then lowered his head immediately when Marcus's gaze flicked toward him. The fear was palpable. Liam felt his blood boil. He had created a transparent tip system to ensure every employee felt respected, and now it had been twisted into a cheap scheme for personal gain. He gripped the wet cloth in his hand so tightly that water dripped down his wrist. But his anger was just beginning, because Marcus's next action was far worse. Later that afternoon, a delivery truck arrived nearly an hour late, leaving several boxes of meat and dairy products by the back door. The weather wasn't scorching, but the direct sunlight hitting the boxes had already caused condensation to form on their surfaces. Liam, standing nearby, played the part of the clueless trainee perfectly. "Mr. Marcus, do we need to check the temperature on these? I heard it's not good to leave meat outside too long." Marcus turned to him, his eyes filled with mockery, as if Liam had just told a joke. He let out a short, sharp laugh, folding his arms across his chest, his voice cold enough to freeze the room. Listen, Noah, you don't need to act like you know everything. If a customer gets sick, they can't prove it was from our meat. Don't waste time on nonsense. Just get it inside and on the shelves. His words carried clearly enough for several nearby employees to hear, but no one said a word. One young worker opened his mouth as if to speak, but Marcus's piercing stare silenced him instantly. Liam froze for a moment, his reflection catching in the polished steel surface of the kitchen equipment. In that moment, he realized this wasn't just poor management or a bad attitude. This was betrayal, a betrayal of the very values he had built Caldwell's Grill upon. It had been created as a place where customers felt safe and employees felt proud. But Marcus was turning it into a place where people only kept their heads down, afraid to challenge what was wrong. Liam bent over the sink again, pretending to scrub, but his expression darkened. Marcus's words still echoed in his mind, each one like salt rubbed into a wound. If a customer gets sick, they can't prove it. That wasn't just negligence, it was contempt. And Liam knew this was the final straw. He lifted his head, his eyes scanning the room, catching Sophie and Donnelly in his gaze, two people who still clung to their dignity in this toxic environment. He couldn't wait any longer. It was time to act. Evening settled in, the warm yellow lights above the kitchen casting long shadows over the hurried figures moving back and forth, the familiar aroma of tomato sauce mixed with the smell of frying oil. But in the tense atmosphere of this branch, even that comforting scent couldn't erase the suffocating feeling in the air. Liam stayed in character as the diligent trainee, his hands moving automatically as he scrubbed trays, but his eyes kept watching. He wasn't looking for mistakes anymore. He was searching for sparks of humanity. And he found them, small and fragile, yet bright enough to make his chest tighten. Sophie Lane stood in the corner of the kitchen, sweat dotting her forehead, but her eyes still shining. A regular customer known for rarely tipping had just left. While packing his order, Sophie had quietly slipped an extra cheese roll into the bag, not with a note or a showy smile, but with a natural, unspoken kindness. Just as Marcus walked by unexpectedly, his sharp eyes flicked to the bag. Sophie froze for half a second, her hand trembling slightly, then quickly forced a weary sigh. "Sorry, I must have mixed up the order. I'll take it out right away." Marcus gave her a quick, annoyed glance, shrugged in irritation, and walked off. Only when his back disappeared did Sophie allow herself a small, quiet smile before returning to her work. Liam caught that smile, and in that moment he understood it was people like her who were silently keeping Caldwell's Grill from becoming a soulless machine. In another corner, Mr. Donnelly was still patiently scrubbing the gaps between the stove burners, even though his shift was nearly over. No one asked him to do it. No one paid for the extra time. No one would even notice, but he worked with the careful attention of someone protecting something precious. A young staff member approached and said softly, "You don't need to do that, Mr. Donnelly. Your shift is over." The older man just smiled kindly, his voice low and gravelly. "The next shift already has enough to do. We should leave this place clean. Never let a customer see dirt, not even once." Hearing those words, Liam felt a mix of pride and sorrow. He had praised Donnelly many times in the past, but now the man had to quietly hold on to his professional pride in isolation, as if integrity had become a luxury in this place. And it wasn't just Sophie or Donnelly. Liam noticed Harper Quinn, too, the server with her hair tied neatly back and a smile that stayed even when Marcus shouted orders right beside her. Harper had a habit of tying apron strings for busy co-workers or discreetly placing glasses of water next to servers who had been standing for hours. These were small gestures, but in such a harsh environment, they were like rare drops of water in a desert. Liam watched Harper hand a glass of water to a flushed, overheated server, smiling lightly. "Hang in there, only an hour left." The young server smiled back, brief but genuine, and Liam could feel the warmth spreading in that tiny exchange. Meanwhile, Marcus moved through the kitchen like a looming shadow of authority, spreading fear with sharp glares and harsh words. But Liam realized something important. People like Sophie, Donnelly, and Harper were the true soul of Caldwell's Grill. They didn't need managerial titles. nor did they seek recognition, but they were the ones keeping the place alive with a breath of humanity, and that was what customers unconsciously felt when they walked into the restaurant, the very thing that had once made Caldwell's Grill special. Liam stood by the sink for a long moment, his hands still moving, but his heart stirred deeply. He was grateful for these people, but he also feared for them. If things continued like this, the good ones would leave, and when they did, Caldwell's Grill would truly collapse. His eyes lifted to the reflection of his fake name tag glinting in the polished steel, and in that reflection, his gaze hardened with resolve. He had to do something, and he had to do it now. Friday afternoon, the air in the kitchen felt heavier than usual. The restaurant had just gone through a rush of customers, and every staff member was exhausted, sweat dripping down their foreheads. But instead of resting, they had to endure Marcus Hale's relentless shouting. He stalked the stations like a ruthless overseer, tossing out biting remarks as if they were knives. "You call this plating acceptable? If I ever see this again, don't bother stepping foot in this kitchen." Each word cut deep into the already fragile pride of the staff. Liam leaned against the sink, his eyes cold as they followed Marcus. He knew this was the moment. The breaking point came when Marcus snapped at Sophie. The young woman had simply asked for a 5-minute break to drink some water after nearly 6 continuous hours of work. Marcus scoffed, his tone dripping with contempt. "This isn't a tea party, Lane. If you want breaks, there are plenty of coffee shops hiring." Sophie flushed red, staring at the floor, her hands tightening on her apron. Harper Quinn, who was stacking trays nearby, looked like she wanted to speak up, but Marcus shot her a sharp warning glance, silencing her instantly. Donnelly watched quietly, his face grim, his eyes full of quiet frustration. Liam drew in a long breath, set down the tray he was holding, and stepped into the center of the kitchen. His voice was calm but firm, cutting through the heavy air. "Marcus, gather all the staff. I have something to say." Marcus turned sharply, frowning in irritation. "Who do you think you are to give orders here? You're not qualified enough to—" But Liam didn't let him finish. Slowly, he untied his apron, pulled the plastic name tag from his chest, held it up for everyone to see, then placed it firmly on the counter. His eyes were steady, his voice powerful and resonant. "My name isn't Noah Gray. I am Liam Cross, the man who built Caldwell's Grill from a small grill stand into this restaurant chain." The kitchen fell into complete silence. Every hand froze mid-motion, every eye turned to Liam. Marcus stood stunned, his face paling before he forced a smirk, trying to recover his composure. I don't know if this is some kind of joke, but you can't accuse me based on rumors. I run this place according to company policy." Liam didn't respond immediately. Instead, he reached into his pocket, pulled out a small device, and pressed a button. From the speaker came Marcus's own voice, cold and dripping with disdain. "If a customer gets sick, they can't prove it's from our meat. Don't waste time checking stupid things." Then followed his harsh words to Sophie, his voice sharp with scorn. "This isn't a tea party, Lane. If you want breaks, there are plenty of coffee shops hiring." Murmurs rose around the kitchen. A few staff members glanced at Marcus with open anger. Harper bit her lip, tears slipping down her cheek, and Donnelly gave a small approving nod as if someone had finally spoken for them all. Marcus's face turned red as he stepped back, stammering, I only did it to maintain discipline." Liam stepped closer, his eyes level with Marcus's, his voice low but commanding. "Discipline does not mean crushing people's dignity. Caldwell's Grill was built on respect and trust, but you turned it into a prison. You've abused your power to humiliate, to steal, and worst of all, to jeopardize customer safety. That is not just a betrayal of these employees." Liam's eyes swept the room. "It is a betrayal of me." Marcus opened his mouth to speak again, but Liam cut him off with a firm final statement. "As of this moment, you are suspended immediately, pending formal disciplinary action from headquarters. You can leave the kitchen now." Marcus stood frozen for a few seconds, his eyes darting around as if searching for support, but all he met were cold stares. He turned and walked out, his footsteps heavy, and the sound of the kitchen door closing behind him echoed like the toll of a bell marking the end. The kitchen remained silent, but this time it wasn't the silence of fear. Liam turned, his gaze meeting each of them. His voice softened, yet every word was steady. I owe you all an apology for letting things get this far, but starting today, things will change. For the first time in many days, Liam saw that none of the staff looked down at the floor. They looked at him not with fear, but with hope, a feeling long absent from this kitchen. The next morning, the atmosphere in the restaurant was completely different. Sunlight streamed through the large glass windows, reflecting off polished wooden tables. The staff gathered in the dining area not to serve customers, but to listen to the founder of Caldwell's Grill speak. This time there were no lowered eyes or hesitant glances. Everyone looked at Liam Cross with anticipation, their expressions a mix of doubt and hope. Liam stepped forward, wearing the same simple shirt from the day before, not a tailored suit. He wanted them to see that he was there not as a distant boss, but as someone willing to listen. He smiled slightly, letting his eyes rest on each face, faces that had endured too much strain for far too long. His voice was calm, yet firm, resonating through the room. I've been with you for the past week, not as a CEO, but as a new trainee. I've witnessed the worst of what has happened here. But more importantly, I've also witnessed the best, amazing people who have quietly kept Caldwell's Grill true to its original values. He walked slowly past the tables, stopping beside Sophie Lane. The young woman flinched slightly, her wide eyes betraying nervousness. Liam looked at her with sincerity. Sophie, your kindness hasn't just helped your co-workers. It has shown customers genuine care, and you did it even when no one asked, even when you were threatened. That tells me you embody the true spirit of Caldwell's Grill. He nodded, then continued, his words making the entire room fall silent. The company will cover a full scholarship for your first year at the community college you applied to. You deserve it. Sophie covered her mouth, her eyes filling with tears, too overwhelmed to speak. Harper Quinn, standing next to her, gave her hand a reassuring squeeze. Liam turned to Harper, smiling warmly. Harper, your patience and optimism have brought customers back time and again. You might not realize it, but I've seen how you encouraged your co-workers, how you made them feel lighter even on the hardest days. I'd like to invite you to join the company's Customer Experience Improvement Council. You will have a direct voice to change what needs to change. And yes, it's a paid position. Harper's mouth fell open in surprise before she nodded, her trembling lips breaking into a bright, grateful smile. Liam then approached Mr. Donnelly. The older man stood straighter than usual, though his eyes still held a hint of modesty. Liam placed a hand on his shoulder. Mr. Donnelly, you're not just a great chef. You've kept this place clean and organized even when no one asked, even when no one paid you for it. You've done it out of pride in your work. The company will pay you for every extra hour you weren't credited for over the past 3 months starting today. Donnelly's eyes reddened slightly and he lowered his head, murmuring, Thank you. No, thank you, Mr. Cross. I was only doing what I thought was right. Liam nodded firmly, and that's exactly why we need more people like you. The room fell silent for a few heartbeats. Then a ripple of applause started, soft at first, then stronger, filling the space with genuine warmth. Faces that had once looked down now lifted, eyes shining with renewed faith. Harper smiled through her tears. Sophie wiped hers quickly, and Donnelly simply shook his head with a modest grin, though pride sparkled in his gaze. Liam looked around, feeling the energy in the room shift, as if a light had been rekindled. He raised his hand, signaling for quiet, his voice steady and resolute. This is not the end. This is only the beginning. Some people will be retrained, some will be replaced, but together we will rebuild the true spirit of Caldwell's Grill. And I promise no one will ever have to work here with their head bowed in fear again. The applause rose once more, louder and more determined, like a promise being born. Liam looked at them, and in that moment he felt it clearly hope was returning. 6 months after that fateful confrontation, a calm morning blanketed Caldwell's Grill. Sunlight streamed through the large glass windows, glinting off the polished wooden floor. The aroma of freshly brewed coffee and toasted bread filled the air, bringing back the warm, welcoming atmosphere that had once been the soul of this place. Liam Cross stood quietly in the corner, no longer the stern owner, but simply an observer, his eyes filled with a pride he could no longer hide. The scene before him was completely transformed. Staff moved quickly, but no longer with the forced, tense motions of before. Laughter and cheerful conversation replaced the weary sighs. Harper Quinn stood at the counter, greeting a regular customer with a bright smile. "Would you like some extra cheese today?" Sophie Lane, now a model of Caldwell's Grill's service spirit, patiently guided a new employee on how to arrange a dish, her voice gentle but confident. In the kitchen, Mr. Donnelly worked as diligently as ever, but now he wasn't alone. Two younger staff members were happily assisting him, laughing and teasing, while Donnelly responded with his usual kind smile, his eyes glowing with quiet satisfaction. Liam walked slowly past the tables, nodding politely to customers. Some recognized him and returned the gesture with genuine respect, not the forced admiration for a powerful boss, but sincere gratitude for the change he had brought. Passing the cashier's counter, he caught Harper's eye. She quickly approached, her tone excited. "Mr. Cross, what a surprise! We just received the latest customer feedback. The ratings are climbing fast. Some even say Caldwell's Grill feels like it used to." Liam smiled, his voice calm. "No, Harper. I think we're even better than before." Before leaving, Liam stopped at an empty table near the window where the sunlight shone brightly on a neatly placed handwritten letter. Someone had carefully set it exactly where he usually sat when visiting. He opened it and immediately recognized the soft, familiar handwriting. It was from Sophie Lane. "Dear Mr. Cross, I just wanted to say thank you. 6 months ago I thought about quitting. I was exhausted and felt like I had no value here anymore. But because of you, I realized that the small things I do still matter. The scholarship you gave me has changed everything this fall. I'll begin my first year at community college. I don't know if I'll succeed, but for the first time, I believe I deserve to try. Thank you for seeing us when no one else did." Liam folded the letter slowly, holding it for a moment longer than usual, as if trying to capture the feeling it brought him. It wasn't the satisfaction that came from profit margins or growth reports, but something far greater, the true meaning of what he had built. He looked around, watching employees work with bright eyes and genuine smiles, customers chatting happily with them. Caldwell's Grill was no longer just a chain of restaurants. It had become a place where people felt respected and proud to contribute. And Liam understood then that his real legacy wasn't in the impressive buildings or million-dollar contracts, but in the people working here. In every moment they treated each other with kindness. As he stepped outside, Liam paused at the doorway, his gaze lifting to the clear blue sky. In his heart, his father's old lesson echoed, the one that had inspired his love for this work. You can build as many restaurants as you want, but what people will remember is not the meal, it's how you made them feel. He smiled softly, a rare, peaceful smile. Caldwell's Grill was back, and this time it would be stronger than ever. A system can be built with money, but only trust and respect can keep it alive for the long run. Liam Cross proved that real change doesn't start with reports or statistics, but with how we see and treat people. If you also believe that kindness is the foundation of lasting success, hit like and subscribe to help us share more inspiring stories like this. And don't forget to leave a comment with 3 words, respect first, because that is exactly what brought Caldwell's Grill back to life.